Alright, next phase of our favorite food color splash item is going to be adding a first layer to our actual food item. For me, that is a pineapple. I have already made some watered down colors that I find that I see inside the pineapple. So I've got those ready to go. I have some lighter yellows, some darker yellows, some orange yellows, some brownish yellows, and green for the stem, as well as a little bit of green within the pineapple itself. Now I've drawn out on my sketch, I have all these kind of little triangle marks that replicate the little frillies that are popping off, and those are very light. So we want to make sure that we are really focusing on avoiding those areas and trying to maintain the paper as our white source as best we can. But if we do run into any issues, we do have white within our painting palette to come back and adjust. So as always with watercolor, make sure there is water on your brush. I'm going to come in with the lightest yellows first. If we start too dark with watercolor, we can't add any lights on top of the dark. We need to start light and then work our way towards dark. So I'm going to start with the lightest yellow and really focus on where those lighter yellows are located. This shape is an oval, and then if you're thinking about form, shape is a two-dimensional object, form is a three-dimensional object. So if you're thinking about the form of the object, it's a cylinder, and the highlighted source is sitting right here on the middle right-hand side of the pineapple with a heavy dark shadow on the left-hand side. So right now I'm going to focus my lighter yellows in that specific area, and this is a watered down brush, a fairly larger brush because I want to cover the surface area in a kind of quicker fashion, avoiding those little triangles that I have created for the lighter areas. So I want to try and maintain as much white on that as possible. Coming in and just layering down my first round of watered down, transparent watercolor to then eventually build up to the opaque watercolor to make it nice, bold, and vibrant, and a realistic looking painting with three-dimensionality and form. Okay, so I'm coming in. The green is going to be darker than the yellow, so the lines, the pencil marks that I have there are eventually going to turn green due to what I see on my visual reference. So I am okay with painting over that right now for the base coat with my yellow, as I will eventually paint the green over top of it to push that green forward and hide the yellow that is underneath. Once again, the green is more dominant than the yellow, so understanding that yellow is lighter than the green, I am comfortable with placing the yellow directly on top of where the green will be eventually. Looks like I need to grab a little bit more yellow, come back with some water, make sure it's nice watered down and transparent. Watercolor, we always want to make sure we're building up layers. Watercolor is not a one and done kind of situation with layering your colors onto your paper. Okay, now I'm transitioning into that darker yellow side. So I'm going to finish up a little bit of that brighter yellow right here. And now I'm going to transition my lighter yellow into that darker yellow on the left-hand side where I see my shadow. Now building up those layers and creating the depth of color with the different yellows layered on top of one another is something that we do want to strive for. So now you can see I've got some darker yellow starting to develop right here, and that's going to help enhance the idea of three-dimensionality and form. And then once that gets placed, then I'm going to come in with my darker browns and layer the darker browns on top of the yellow to then really showcase that idea of darkness on the left-hand side, lightness on the right-hand side, and we'll already start to gain an understanding of that three-dimensionality. But we do have a long way to go to get to where we want to get to really make a realistic three-dimensional painting. Okay, so one more quick swirl of the yellow right here. Now I'm I'm going to come in with my orangey brown, water that down a little bit. Now with coming in with the darker values, I really want to avoid those white areas, because with these darker values, if it goes on top where the white's going to need to be located, we can lose that idea of that popping forward off the pineapple, the little frillies going on there. Grab some more of this brownish color for the shadowed area of my pineapple. Focusing that only on the left-hand side where my shadow is located. We will eventually come back through and add another layer on top of our color splash to really develop those colors as well. And then we'll also put a shadow under the color splash to make it look like they're physically splashing and popping off the page. And we'll do that with shadows to enhance the three-dimensionality and push the shadows further beneath the splashes themselves to make it look like it's raised off the ground or the paper. Okay, now this is a little on the wet side, so I'm going to go ahead and transition to the leaves on the top, because I don't want to overwork wet areas of my watercolor, because then that can start to tear the paper, and we don't want that. And this is just a base coat, so I will eventually come back and add all the finer details when the time comes, after I have my first layer down. Got some darker values up here from the leaves casting a shadow onto the actual pineapple itself, so I'll go ahead and place some darker values at the top, and we have some more darker values around the base down here. Now I'm just starting to gain an understanding of where things go, and I'm filling all the white paper where there needs to be color, so right now that's just what I'm focusing on. Alright, so now we have our base coat down for our pineapple. You can already start to see the idea of it kind of rolling. Clean my brush off. Now with my stem, or my leaves, I'm going to have to pay attention to where there's darker greens, lighter greens, where there's kind of white greens going on. I got some lighter, whiter greens down the center. And since they layer on top of one another, there are some variety of darker greens. So I'm going to come in and start to develop those greens. Shadow green right there, shadow green underneath here. Whenever something layers on top of another, that thing on top is going to cast a shadow onto what's underneath of it. You see that a lot with flowers. Flower petals kind of sit on top of one another, and then you would understand which flower petal is on top of which, because it would cast a shadow onto the one underneath. Same idea here, each leaf is sitting on top of another leaf, so then the one on top is casting that shadow to the one below. So right now we're kind of working in a gestural kind of mindset, quick, loose, but still controlled understanding of where the colors go. And then once we layer this base coat down, we will let it dry, and then we will have the ability to come in with more opaque watercolor, more paint, less water, and develop the idea of details, three-dimensionality, and form. So right now I just have one kind of green on my brush now, just to get that first layer down, and then I can come in with a darker green to start to enhance the idea of where the shadows are located. Once again, right now I only have one color green on the brush, as opposed to the pineapple I had multiple values of yellow, because it was just a bigger surface area to work with, and there's a variety of yellows on there. There are a variety of greens as well, which I can now start to introduce. One more layer with the green I currently have, and then I'm going to grab some darker green and just enhance the idea of where the shadowed areas are. Okay, clean my brush off. Every time I go into a new color, I want to make sure my brush is nice and clean. Now I've got a darker green. Now I really need to pay attention to where there's overlap. I can come in here and add some darker green there. Pinpointing exactly where my darker greens are located based off my reference photo, and working outward to the highlights. Still allowing for that white paper to shine through as my white. Being controlled and specific, but at the same time loose and quick, just because this is the base layer. Bigger brushes with more gestural movements to start, then you will work your way towards smaller brushes and more controlled ideas of where things are going, as well as paying attention to more specific details. You're getting a really nice painterly effect going on right now. Alright, I think maybe last few strokes here, and then that will be the completion of the first layer or base coat of our pineapple. And then we will build up a second layer, develop the opacity, and continue from there. You can already start to see the three-dimensionality coming alive. Alright, so go ahead and give that a try with your favorite food item. We should already have the color splash as we want to work background to foreground. And you guys should be well on your way to creating a nice, realistic three-dimensional painting of your food item with a vibrant, full of life color splash behind it. Happy painting!